The people of Vermont may not be ready to vote for independence today, but on page 35 of your book, you cite 8 factors which might precipitate a meltdown sufficient to spark political upheaval. Is this the path by which Vermonters will be led to choose independence? And can you tell us which of the 8 factors is most likely to spark this, in what time frame?
Well, I think it goes back to something I said earlier, the confluence of 2 of these. The current meltdown of financial institutions globally, that's still being acted out. We don't know how deep that's going to go, but that factor alone could bring down the empire. But if by some minor miracle some of these bailout techniques, the trillions of dollars the U.S. government is throwing at the problem, if they were to kick in and they were to work, and we got a temporary reprieve, we'd be immediately back into the problem we were in last summer of peak oil, because the demand for oil will go back up. The supply is, in the short run, is finite, and the price of oil can only go in one direction, up. And so one can imagine being whipsawed back and forth between these 2 problems of global financial meltdown and the peak oil problem. I see what will bring down the empire is the confluence of those 2 forces.
General Motors, is advertising a plan to introduce the Vio next year, a plug-in hybrid car which will get 40 miles to the gallon. Plug-in hybrids, which can run off windmills, plug them in the night and they run in the morning. Wouldn't that be maybe a solution to the oil problem?
It might be clearly a step in the right direction. It remains to be seen whether General Motors will be the company that brings that out. I'm sure somebody's going to, even if General Motors doesn't survive. But yeah, that would certainly be one possibility.
Let's see, you cite on page 35 here, an ever-increasing trade deficit, a precipitous decline in the value of the dollar. That really struck me because I've been very sensitive to the fact that during the 8 years of the Bush administration, our dollar relative to the euro has declined by 30%. So, well, we're both seniors, and so we work all our lives and save, and suddenly 30%, it's like taking 30% of the money out of the bank account. So I can understand how if it goes any lower, this could really cause an upheaval.
Yeah, well, ironically, as I mentioned earlier, the last few months, the dollar has actually been strengthening against the euro. Ironically, in the midst of this financial meltdown, for the reasons I spoke of previously, people drawn to these U.S. Treasury bonds that we talked about as the safe haven. I think it's a temporary phenomenon that as the interest rates go down and the risk goes up, people will eventually bail out of those Treasury bonds, and the decline of the dollar against the euro will continue. It remains to be seen, to what extent one ought to hedge one's bets and invest in gold and silver and other so-called fixed assets.
The key question on the Treasury bonds, I think, is will the government default on them? If there's no default, then whether people bail out or not, it doesn't really matter, because especially with the TIPS bonds, you get your money out anytime you want. But at what point will there be a default? That's
yeah, or just if the Chinese and the Japanese have a change of heart and choose to put their money elsewhere than buying those bonds. I mean, they're among the biggest takers of them.
So that could trigger a default if China decided to take all its money out.
Or not even all, just some. If the Chinese or the Japanese start buying gold, putting more into gold than, say, into treasury bonds. That wouldn't take a big shift to trigger a...
So then our government wouldn't be able to pay the money to them, and so that would put us into default.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all of our savings bonds that we have would be worthless.
Yeah. Pretty scary.
Yes, certainly is.